Disclaimer: this video includes almost exclusively facts. All information about Donald Trump and Ulfric Stormcloak obtained will be provided in the video description. I've done my best to compare these two figures as best as I can. Thank you. So if you've been on the internet in Elder Scrolls spheres for over the past, like a decade now, you may have heard the idea floating around that Ulfric Stormcloak is literally Donald Trump. If you Google this, you find posts from like 8 or 9 years ago. It's been a thing for a while, I promise. So I thought with the recent election having happened, now would be a fun time to release the video. Now, before we get too deep, I do want to tell you that I hope this doesn't get too political. This video is supposed to be for fun, and I will be doing my best job to make this as unbiased as possible. We'll be taking a look at Ulfric's life and policies for Skyrim, and compare and contrast them with things that Donald Trump has said and done in his early life and during his presidency and campaigns. We're doing it this way since there are fewer facts about Ulfric than there are about Trump, and if we went through every Donald Trump fact today, we'd be here for a long time. So, for example, we won't really be touching on Trump's family life or his time on The Apprentice much, since that doesn't really have much to do with Ulfric. With all of that out of the way, I hope you enjoy. Now, we start off strong here, since both Ulfric and Trump were born to what I would say are well-off families, with Donald Trump being the son of Fred and Mary Trump, and Ulfric being the son of Hogue Stormcloak. The Stormcloaks had been living in the city of Windhelm since its foundation, according to Ulfric's long-lost kin, Thane Mira Stormcloak in ESO, and they appear to have always had some sort of political importance within Skyrim.
I am the Thane of Windhelm. My father was captain of the guard. I followed in his footsteps and climbed a bit higher. We Stormcloaks helped build Windhelm centuries ago. We're an old family, and we're proud of our heritage.
Before Ulfric, his father was Hogue Stormcloak, who ruled as the Jarl of Windhelm, making Ulfric royalty in his youth. And of course, later on, Ulfric Stormcloak would go on to replace Hogue as the next Jarl of Windhelm. While Donald Trump can't quite be tied down to New York City as much as Ulfric can to Windhelm, the Trump family was prominent before Donald's birth. Donald's father, Fred Trump, was in charge of a successful real estate company called Elizabeth Trump & Son, Elizabeth being Donald's grandmother and Fred Trump's mother. This company created housing locations for middle-class families and eventually would morph into the Trump organization that we know today, which Trump himself owns to this day. So simply based on that, we can say that both Donald Trump and Ulfric Stormcloak, at the very least, grew up in well-off families and eventually took over their father's positions in their adult lives. But we're not done yet. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information on Ulfric's early life because Bethesda didn't really write that much lore about him from that time, but we do know that at some point when he was young, Ulfric was selected by the Greybeards to join them at High Hrothgar, study the voice, and eventually become a Greybeard himself. Ulfric claims he spent 10 years with them until the Great War happened, in which he enlisted himself into the Imperial Legions to fight against the rising threat of the Thalmor and the Altmerry Dominion. During this time, Ulfric was captured actually by the Thalmor during the campaign for the White Gold Tower. The Thalmor knew who he was as the son of the Jarl of Windhelm, and according to the Thalmor dossier on him, he was interrogated and likely tortured during this time. He became tricked into thinking that information he gave up while interrogated was crucial in the fall of the Imperial City, and the Thalmor then let him escape back to Skyrim, hoping that the now radicalized Ulfric would sow chaos throughout the land. Donald Trump, of course, has a bit of a track record when it comes to his early life. According to Fred Trump in a 1987 interview with the New York Times, he was a pretty rough fellow when he was small. As such, Donald Trump was sent off to boarding school at age 13 to the New York Military Academy, where he said that he enjoyed the structure of the school, but that was the extent of Trump's involvement with the military. At the time, of course. So Ulfric and Donald Trump were both sent away from their homes when they were young, but their paths heavily diverged from there. Staying on the topic of the military, Donald Trump is reported to have been a draft dodger, providing fake documents in order to get out of Vietnam during the 1960s, allowing him to avoid ever seeing combat. And of course, in recent years, Donald Trump has made several comments about veterans, specifically one in reference to former Senator John McCain, that have made people very upset.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
So, obviously, in terms of service to their countries, they are quite opposed, and I honestly bet they wouldn't get along with one another if you left them in a room. However, being the commander-in-chief, you could make the case that ultimately Donald Trump was actually more involved in the military than Ulfric ever was in his own army. When Ulfric returned from war with the signing of the White Gold Concordat, he reclaimed the city of Markarth from the Reachmen who had taken over since the start of the war, though he was jailed afterwards for permitting Talos worship in the Reach, which was outlawed under the treaty. Ulfric served 7 years in prison due to what would be deemed the Markarth incident, and was only released upon his father's death when he was returned to Windhelm to succeed him as Jarl of the city.
My father, the Great Bear of Eastmarch, died during my imprisonment after the Markarth incident. I, his only son, forced to deliver his eulogy via letter I had smuggled out of prison, such is the love of Titus meat for his subjects. When finally set free, I returned to Windhelm and was greeted by a city in mourning, at one with my own grief and anger, clamoring in angry voices, calling out for justice, for war. They sat me on the throne of Ysgramor, the throne of my father. I only hope I can prove worthy of that honor.
Now, Donald Trump himself has not served time in the way that Ulfric did, but on August 23, 2023, Trump was indicted on charges of racketeering and voluntarily surrendered himself to the authorities, leading to the famous mugshot of him in the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta, Georgia. Along with this, Trump was indicted of 34 felonies pertaining to falsifying business records surrounding his involvement with adult film actress Stormy Daniels. The jury ruled that he was guilty on all charges, and his sentencing is set for November 26th, 2024, which, if I've planned things correctly, will be when this video is released. There are several other crimes and lawsuits that Donald Trump has been convicted of throughout his 78 years of life, but to the point of this video, Ulfric has served serious jail time, and as of the writing and recording of this script, Trump has not. Moving on to their campaigns and elections, Ulfric, due to the nature of Skyrim's government, never actually had to be elected as the next Jarl. He was simply appointed as such, it would seem. Though upon the death of High King Istlod around 4th Era 183, he began sort of campaigning for the highest office in Skyrim, the High King. A moot was convened which chose the next High King to be Torygg, High King Istlod's son. Ulfric used the forum of the moot to voice his concerns for a Skyrim that would become free from the influence of the Empire, which, by this point, Ulfric had felt betrayed Skyrim upon their signing of the White Gold Concordat. Shortly thereafter, the Stormcloaks were formed. It was a small private army at the time that was stirred up mostly by Ulfric's rhetoric about Talos worship. Flipping back to Trump in the year 2015, he announced that he was going to run for president of the United States. This had been brewing for some time, with Trump teasing that he would run in both the Reform Party in 2000 and against Obama in 2011, so at the time, he was not taken too seriously as a candidate. However, Trump was famous. He'd built his brand as a businessman, and at this point, the Trump brand was so powerful that he'd even been able to lend his name to golf courses and hotels to make a profit. No matter if his businesses had failed or if he'd gone bankrupt, it didn't really matter. The brand and the image of Trump was that of a businessman, and that's all that mattered at the end of the day. Trump, formerly a member of the Republican, Reform, and Democratic parties, joined once again with the Republican Party this time and entered into the Republican primary elections. Both Trump and Ulfric had powerful tools at their disposals. The power of the voice. During the Republican primary election, Trump stood his ground against the other candidates and said things that many people considered shocking, at least at the time.
Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake.
He was not someone who acted like a politician, necessarily, and he spoke to people in a way that, for many, was refreshing and raw. Little by little, he defeated his fellow Republican candidates until he rose to the top and became the Republican candidate for president in the 2016 election. His debates with Hillary Clinton went very much the same way. He even came up with silly nicknames for his opponents to make them look foolish, which is a tactic that he's maintained to this day.
Hillary Clinton, commonly referred to as Crooked Hillary.
Now, Sleepy Joe. Oh, he's running tomorrow.
Donald Trump is undeniably a master of the Thum. Hell, Sleepy Joe is even enough syllables to form a dragon shout. But what about Ulfric? Well, Ulfric used his power of the voice in a different way. According to several different accounts, Ulfric Stormcloak had arranged a meeting with the young High King Torygg in the throes of the Civil War, which they had assumed was to discuss the independence of Skyrim that Ulfric had been desiring since his anointment. Instead, Ulfric used this time to challenge the High King to a duel in adherence with the ancient Nord traditions. Had Torygg refused, a new moot could be convened to potentially choose a new High King. But if Torygg had accepted, he would surely be bested by Ulfric, whose combat experience far outweighed his own. Ultimately, Torygg took Ulfric up on his offer and was slain in combat by the Jarl of Windhelm. The details of the battle differ on the precise death of the young High King, but it is clear in every account that Ulfric Stormcloak used his power of the voice, the power of the Thu'um that he had learned with the Greybeards, on the young High King, striking him down thereafter.
Not entirely true, though not entirely false either. Any Nord can learn the way of the voice by studying with the Greybeards, given enough ambition and dedication. My shouting Torygg to the ground proved he had neither. However, it was my sword piercing his heart that killed him.
This event was enough to draw up attention for Ulfric in a serious manner, and as his numbers in the Stormcloak army grew even higher, so too did his political supporters. The once quiet Jarls of the Rift, Winterhold, and the Pale all backed Ulfric after years of silence. This also mirrors Donald Trump, who, once seen as an outsider, began drawing up political support after it was evident that he would become the Republican nominee. Ulfric, alongside the actual literal power of the Thu'um, was a talented political speaker as well. His I fight speech is one of the most memorable moments from an NPC in the game, I think, regardless, even if you're a Stormcloak or an Imperial.
I fight for the men I've held in my arms, dying on foreign soil. I fight for their wives and children whose names I heard whispered in their last breath. I fight for we few who did come home, only to find our country full of strangers wearing familiar faces. I fight for my people, impoverished to pay the debts of an empire too weak to rule them, yet brands them criminals for wanting to rule themselves. I fight so that all the fighting I've already done hasn't been for nothing. I fight because I must.
So as far as surpassing expectations, aspirations for the highest office in the land, and talent with a voice go, I think all boxes are checked for these two here. Donald Trump and Ulfric Stormcloak, upon taking their respective offices, both promised to drain the swamp.
Drain the swamp.
In Donald Trump's case, the swamp he was referring to was Washington, D.C., and the phrase represented getting the old, corrupt, or inefficient politicians out of office and bringing in new blood. Trump has repeatedly said this, and while running for re-election in 2020, he can be seen repeating it again. Ulfric Stormcloak has also stated similar things about the political situation in Skyrim, saying that the old Jarls, specifically the Imperial supporting Jarls, need to be replaced with true Nords, i.e., those who support his rebellion. High King Torygg was seen as a weak and inefficient High King to Ulfric, and his killing of him was the first demonstration of his draining Skyrim's swamp, so to speak.
There hasn't been a true High King in Skyrim for generations. For too long, he's been handpicked by the Emperor and given emphatic nods by milk-drinking Jarls addicted to Imperial coin. It's time we had a real High King, one of our own making.
The main thing that I see people talk about between these two, however, is their nationalist policies. For reference, nationalism can be defined as love and devotion to one's country above all others, and I've linked a video below by the amazing Mr. Beat to help illustrate the differences between patriotism and nationalism. Let's focus on the Stormcloak movement for a bit. A common battle cry for the Nords in Skyrim, and as such the Stormcloaks, is "Skyrim is for the Nords." This sentiment is meant to reflect that the Nords wish to be free from the imperial government of the Cyrodiilic Empire and allowed to govern themselves. However, there is a double-edged sword to this policy, as it also implies that Skyrim is not for other races. And this is somewhat reflected in the political climate of Skyrim at the time of Ulfric's reign as Jarl in Windhelm. Racial tensions in the city of Windhelm are extremely high due to the influx of refugees from the Red Year, and that much is evident as soon as one enters the city.
Hey, maybe the reason these Greyskins don't help in the war is because they're Imperial spies.
Imperial spies? You can't be serious.
Maybe we'll pay you a visit tonight, little spy. We got ways of finding out what you really are.
Oh, do you hate the Dark Elves? Are you here to bully us and tell us to leave? You've come to the wrong city, then. Windhelm's a haven of prejudice and narrow thinking, unworthy of one such as you.
Outside of just Windhelm, the city of Riften has dealt with a lot of migration from Morrowind as well, and both Riften and Windhelm have high Argonian and Dunmeri populations. The difference between the two cities is that the Dunmer and Windhelm are mostly confined to the Grey Quarter, and the Argonians are confined to the docks. Many of the Nords in Windhelm consider the Dark Elves to be unwelcome in their city, and there is a propaganda piece called Scourge of the Grey Quarter, which essentially is a smear piece on the Dunmer, calling them lazy and posing the question of why the Dunmer don't integrate with the culture and get to work. Well, the truth of the matter is that every Dunmer in Windhelm is actually employed, and many of them even have jobs outside of the Grey Quarter, with one even owning a farm outside of the city. However, the Grey Quarter is a de facto slum, and the Dunmer are forced to live there, as we hear from Aval Atheron.
Windhelm is divided into 4 quarters. The Grey Quarter is the one that's home to all the city's Dark Elves. If it looks to you like an impoverished slum, that's because it is. Ulfric prefers that we live in squalor. He has nothing but disdain for anyone who isn't a Nord. He tolerates us, but that's the extent of his hospitality.
Well, you see where we have to live. This forgotten alley. All the filth from the upper quarters flows downhill, like they say. Good luck getting one of the guards to help with anything. I tried to get Ulfric to even come down here to see the squalor, but the High Lord of his mightiness couldn't find the time.
I'm a Dark Elf and I live in Windhelm, so yes, I live in the Grey Quarter. You must be new around here, or you'd know they don't let my kind live anywhere outside that slum.
Ulfric is repeatedly referred to as having nationalist tendencies and only caring about the Nords, and this can be heard from both Dunmer and Nords alike within the city. Whether or not Ulfric is a racist is unconfirmed, but it is certainly true that he puts Skyrim's needs and the needs of the Nordic citizens above and beyond that of citizens from other provinces or ethnicities.
Things have been a lot worse around here since Ulfric took over.
Now, on to Donald Trump. I think we can equate the MAGA movement pretty closely with the Stormcloaks. Hadvar refers to the Stormcloaks as Ulfric's private army, and I would go so far as to say that the MAGA movement in the United States has been fairly sycophantic when it comes to Donald Trump.
We got to go out and we got to fight like hell and we got to win the House and we got to win the Senate.
If you own a MAGA hat, I'm not trying to call you out or anything, but it should be said that something like the January 6th Capitol attack will go down in history and proves that Donald Trump supporters will go to extremes for him. Also, Trump, like Ulfric, has been repeatedly called a nationalist. In fact, Trump is a self-declared nationalist, as stated in one of his rallies.
You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
During his January 20th, 2017 presidential inauguration speech, Donald Trump said the following.
That it is the right of all nations to put their own interests first.
So, yes, if anyone has any questions or reservations about this, Donald Trump certainly says that he will put American needs first before the needs of other nations. Make America Great Again is also quite a similar phrase to Skyrim belongs to the Nords, as they both have a hidden implication. As we talked about with Skyrim belongs to the Nords, that phrase has the implication that other races are unwelcome in Skyrim. What Make America Great implies is that America is not great at the current moment. I think this is another one of the big talking points between both Ulfric and Trump. Both see a weaker version of their nation than they would like, and have tried to embolden their populations to take back their former glory. Ulfric invokes the Nordic traditions of old, such as Talos worship, and Trump largely invokes American exceptionalism, which, according to Donald E. Pease, a professor of English at Dartmouth University, is an ideology that puts America as a uniquely glorious nation above others. This ideology can be traced back to the founding of the original 13 colonies and is extremely present in Manifest Destiny, and it's certainly something that Donald Trump has channeled in his politics. On Trump's official webpage, there is a link to the official Republican Party platform, and this is the first 3 paragraphs of the preamble. Our nation's history is filled with the stories of brave men and women who gave everything they had to build America into the greatest nation in the history of the world. Generations of American patriots have summoned the American spirit of strength, determination, and love of country to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The American people have proven time and again that we can overcome any obstacle and any force pitted against us. In the early days of our republic, the founding generation defeated what was then the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. In the 20th century, America vanquished Nazism and fascism, and then triumphed over Soviet communism after 44 years of the Cold War. But now we are a nation in serious decline. Our future, our identity, and our very way of life are under threat like never before. Today, we must once again call upon the same American spirit that led us to prevail through every challenge of the past if we are going to lead our nation to a brighter future. However, much like the Stormcloak's nationalist tendencies, Donald Trump's platform has been known to bring out the worst in people, and racist is a term that gets used when referring to Trump quite often, just like Ulfric and the Stormcloaks. Beginning in 1973, the Trump Organization was sued by the Department of Justice for not renting to African American families. I own a copy of the book Disloyal, which was written by Michael Cohen, who served as one of Trump's lawyers for 12 years, from 2006 to 2018. In the book, Michael Cohen recounts his time under Trump, and in the foreword he states, "Apart from his wife and children, I knew Trump better than anyone else did. In some ways, I knew him better than even his family did, because I bore witness to the real man, in strip clubs, shady business meetings, and in the unguarded moments when he revealed who he really was. A cheat, a liar, a fraud, a bully, a racist, a predator, a con man." I'd like to point out that Michael Cohen is a biased source, but that doesn't entail that it's unreliable. The bias, of course, comes from Cohen's history with Trump, but considering I had the book right here on my shelf, I figured I'd pull from it. In 2015, Donald Trump was fired from NBC for what they perceived as racist remarks towards Mexican immigrants. As sitting president on January 27, 2017, Donald Trump enacted Executive Order 13769, colloquially known as the Muslim ban. This ban was put into place to halt entry into the United States to citizens of Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, and received heavy criticism for its racial implications, despite Trump's claims that it was intended to limit the number of citizens entering the United States from countries with a, quote, proven history of terrorism. Now again, I'm not here to point the finger one way or the other at Ulfric nor at Trump. I'm simply pointing out that they are both consistently referred to as racists and may or may not do things that don't help their cases. One note that I want to touch on as well is Trump and Ulfric's views on religion. Ulfric Stormcloak has taken a firm stance on Talos worship, being a champion for its inclusion into Skyrim and making it one of his main issues in his rebellion. Like we talked about in Markarth, Ulfric was unwilling to hand over the city to the Empire unless they permitted Talos worship within its walls. So in my eyes, it's pretty clear to see that Ulfric is a pretty hardcore follower. Trump, on the other hand, has consistently shown that he's not necessarily a Christian, despite his best attempts to appear as one. Again, in Disloyal, Cohen makes the claim that Trump puts on the appearance of a believer in an effort to win votes.
Christians, get out and vote just this time.
Cohen states that he didn't care about religion. Homosexuals, divorce, the breakup of the nuclear family, he'd say whatever they wanted to hear. And they'd hear whatever they wanted to hear. It could go either way. I'm not trying to testify for the mind state of Donald Trump, but this clip is certainly not one that has me convinced Trump is a wholly pious man. So that puts Ulfric and Trump at least at odds for me in this aspect, since Ulfric clearly has more fervor in his faith than the Don at the very least. And as a final interesting point, I wanted to talk about their names, Trump and Stormcloak. Both are last names that have almost become something more. Trump turned his last name into a brand, and he uses it to show status, wealth, and power. Stormcloak, on the other hand, is honestly just inherently a really cool sounding name. Ulfric, however, took his clan's title a bit further and named his entire movement after himself, using, much like Trump, his name to convey power. And on that note, I think I'm done. Let me know if I missed anything major. I'm sure that I glossed over something important. So in conclusion, I would ask you, are Donald Trump and Ulfric Stormcloak really that similar? And honestly, I don't know. I think it's somewhere in the middle, but I'll let you guys decide below in the comments. I can't promise that I'm going to be responding to every comment, but I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. As a disclaimer, if you're being an idiot in the comments, I do reserve the right to skip you entirely, and if you're being a bigot in the comments, YouTube will automatically remove your comment, so don't blame me if your posts go missing. It was not my fault. I know this is a bit of a departure from my normal videos, but I thought that 1, this would be topical, and 2, it just seemed like fun. I'm deliberately not including a channel member shoutout on this video because it may be seen as too political by some of you, and I don't want to attach your names to something you disagree with. I am, of course, though, thankful for each and every one of you who have decided to help donate to this channel, and I would hope to continue making interesting content like this in the future for you guys if this video does well enough. Thank you all for making it this far. I cannot tell you guys how important engagement is on YouTube, so a like, share, or comment would be appreciated, and I'd only ask you to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Catch you in the next one. Peace out.